people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. The Bazaldua siblings are ready to shine as Night of Champions returns to Thunder Studios in Long Beach, California on Friday, January 30th. Top-ranked Perla Basaldua steps into a 6-round showdown against Isis CO. The focus of this segment, the focus of our conversation here, Pearl is a fighter that they signed in March of last year, just before their ESPN deal ended the following summer. And I believe that she's only boxed once under the top-ranked banner. Since then, she's been outsourced to smaller shows under different promotional banners, like she's about to be at the end of this month on the 30th. She's going to be facing 1-1 Isis CO, a 19-year-old Orthodox fighter in a very similar place in her career to Pearl, in a bantamweight contest scheduled for 6 rounds. Pearl, 20 years old, sporting a professional record of 3 wins with no losses and 1 draw, 1 recorded knockout, only 20 years old, is another fighter so affected by Top Rank's precarious situation, still being without a broadcaster after all these months. She has managed to stay busy in the absence of what's supposed to be her major promoter. She fought in August, then she fought again towards the end of last year in October. What becomes of Pearl if Top Rank can't recover from this and doesn't land on their feet? Well, I would advise that she see about going to Matchroom, who could use a young female fighter of Mexican descent, which tends to move the needle in this part of the world. She could see about going to Matchroom, becoming a part of their new stable of Valkyries, or she could go where the rest of the female fighters have gone, over to MVP. She campaigns at bantamweight, and it just so happens that MVP has a lot going on at bantamweight. They have Shernika Johnson, who holds all 4 alphabet titles, but they also have Dina Thorsland, the Ring Magazine and Lineal champion. Just as well, they have young Crystal Rosado. Young fighter like Pearl is a young fighter of Puerto Rican descent. It wouldn't hurt to have a young fighter of Mexican descent. Anecdotally, they also have former champions Ebony Bridges, Shannon Courtenay, Sharita Metcalf, any one of which they could use to build up their younger fighters coming through, like Pearl. The saving grace for her is even if Top Rank can't recover from their current situation, there are other places that she can go, and she's very young, just getting started at only 20 years old. So there's still hope for young Perla Basaldua, who will be returning to action at the end of this month on the 30th, and we'll talk more about the fight as the fight date approaches. In men's heavyweight news, veteran fighter James Toney believes that Deontay Wilder is going to knock out Usyk. Toney said Usyk hasn't fought anyone like Wilder, who can throw wild punches from halfway across the ring. Toney told ES News, "I'm going to tell you right now, if that fight happens, Wilder's gonna knock him out. Usyk is a good fighter, but he ain't prepared for someone who's gonna throw punches at him like that. He ain't fought nobody like that yet." Another shit boxing take from an American. I've been saying it for a while now. America has become the breeding ground for some of the worst, by and large, the worst boxing takes in all of professional boxing. And this is one of the worst ones I've heard in recent memory, because Wilder throws wild punches. That's not exactly a good thing. So fucking what? Where were those wild punches when he fought Tyson Fury 2 times? Where were those wild punches when he fought Joseph Parker more recently? And Zile Chang. Joseph beat him comprehensively, and Zhang steamrolled him. Where was Wilder's wild punches then? Why didn't they avail him that they're now supposed to avail him against Alexander Usyk, who's better than them? I don't know how much thought James Toney gave this evaluation, what passes for analysis in the American boxing scene, but when you talk to what are supposed to be these esteemed professionals, you try to pick their boxing brain for some insights, some analysis. Because they're supposed to know all the things that you don't know. All you really ever get is partiality. Of course, the American fighter is going to back the other American fighter against the Eastern European. And the rationale is wild punches. That's what'll win him the fight. Wild punches.
Try not to fall out of my seat from this riveting analysis.
It's tribalism that motivates it. And I'm not even telling you that there isn't a place for tribalism in the sport of boxing. There is a place for tribalism in all of organized sports. But when you go up to a professional and you try to pick their brain for some insights, for the nonsense that you usually get from these boxers when you ask them, you may as well not ask them because they're not going to tell you anything useful.
Wild punches.
I take it that James Toney must not have seen Deontay Wilder's last fight in Wichita, Kansas against the journeyman in Tyrell Herndon, who it took him a long while to finally get him out of there. And he didn't exactly get him out of there. He forced a stoppage.
A messy looking one.
You could see in the fight that Deontay Wilder's suddenness and explosiveness, the snap in his punches, it's gone, man. It's gone. Likely the byproduct of the gradual decay of time in tandem with all the surgeries that he's had to the same arm.
What's it up to now, 7 or 8?
You guys that have been with the channel long enough will know that I was never a fan of Wilder's boxing, and I was never a big believer in his power either. Just the other day, I saw that the people at World Boxing News are still doing their part to put Deontay Wilder on a pedestal, ranking him as the #1 hardest puncher in heavyweight history, ahead of Ernie Shavers and George Foreman, Mike Tyson, Joe Frazier, Vladimir Klitschko,
#1,
ahead of Joe Louis, Lennox Lewis, Sonny Liston, fighters who have knocked out more high-profile opponents, more high-profile fighters, better fighters than anybody Wilder ever knocked out. Wilder's claim to fame as the Bronze Bomber is all predicated upon
knocking out club fighters. Nobody good.
the first 7 years of his career, and all the scrubs and no-hopers and fat cruiserweights that he knocked out along the way, none of which were noteworthy, worth remembering.
They would rate Deontay Wilder ahead of Ernie Shavers.
When I looked at the list and how it was structured, I could tell almost immediately that it wasn't put together by anyone who knows anything about any of those fighters. Not just because they've got Deontay Wilder ranked at #1 either, but because they ranked Joe Frazier ahead of Joe Louis as one of the hardest punchers. Joe Frazier ahead of Sonny Liston?
What the fuck?
Vladimir Klitschko ahead of Joe Louis. Vladimir Klitschko ahead of Sonny Liston as one of the top 10 hardest punchers?
Listen, it's not that Dr. Steelhammer couldn't punch. He could punch. He actually has more knockouts than Deontay Wilder.
He literally has more knockouts than Deontay Wilder has fights. So there's a precedent for Vlad to be there, but with context. And if you know anything about these fighters, you wouldn't rank Vlad ahead of Sonny Liston. You wouldn't rank Vlad ahead of Joe Louis. And you wouldn't rank Wilder ahead of them.
You stupid?
If I were to restructure the list, I might feel so inclined to completely remove Wilder from it and swap him out for Shannon Briggs, because Shannon Briggs at least holds a heavyweight record. The heavyweight record for most first-round knockouts, where Wilder doesn't hold a heavyweight record of any kind. For knockouts, or first-round knockouts, or the most knockouts, why is he even there?
Because somebody young made this list. Somebody who's young, doesn't know anything about previous eras of boxing, and they're sweet on Wilder. They want Wilder to be ranked among these guys.
But nobody who knows anything about these guys would rank Deontay Wilder ahead of George Foreman. George Foreman easily deconstructed a then unbeaten Joe Frazier in just 2 rounds after 6 knockdowns. Olympic gold medalist Joe Frazier, the same Joe Frazier that gave Muhammad Ali all he could handle in all 3 of their fights after 2 rounds with George.
George was gonna kill him. They had to pull him out.
That's what George's power was able to do to Joe Frazier. Who the fuck did Deontay Wilder beat that compares to a Joe Frazier? Who did his power
Nobody.
destroy? The caliber of a smoking Joe Frazier. That Wilder should be ranked ahead of George?
Did you hear what Ernie Shavers' contemporaries all used to say about him and how hard he hits and his power? They don't talk about Wilder like that in this era.
Even more outraged to see this cheap carbon copy, the Bronze Bomber, ranked way ahead of the Brown Bomber.
Joe Louis.
You ranked Joe Louis at number 8 on an all-time great list of big punchers. Clearly, you don't know the ball from the bounce. You don't know nothing about these fighters.
This has got to be rage bait or something.
What it is the continued effort within the American boxing space to elevate Wilder to a position that he has not earned. They're still doing their part at WBN to put him on a pedestal, just like James Toney when he says that Wilder knocks out Usyk.
They can watch him get bullied by Tyson Fury in their last 2 meetings, watch him get bullied by Joseph Parker and steamrolled by Zile Zhang.
Still find the time to say stupid shit like this. Wilder beats Usyk because of wild punches. It all might turn out to be much ado about nothing anyway, because Wilder versus Usyk may not be Wilder's next fight. It would seem that Wilder versus Chisora is inching closer to the finish line.
For April in London, that if Deontay Wilder does end up sharing the ring with Derek, he may not make it to a Usyk fight.
The question is, how could Wilder have already made so much progress for a Chisora fight when what we've been hearing about is an Usyk fight? And the conundrum with Wilder versus Usyk always was, who's going to pay for it? The two teams and the two fighters may want to put it together, fight each other.
And if you did it, it might sell some tickets, but before it comes to that, somebody has to pay to make it happen. Somebody has to put it all together. And because neither fighter is with a major promotional outfit,
they got no financier. The guy who was said to be doing it, Ed Pereira of I Visit Boxing, turned out to be a fast-talking fraud. It's already been said on both sides that neither Team Wilder or Team Usyk have had any dialogue with Ed Pereira or I Visit Boxing. All that stuff we heard last week turned out to be bullshit.
He's just throwing their names around to promote his fledgling company that doesn't seem to have any traction or any substance. So he's not the financier.
Neither is Turkey El Al Sheikh, according to Igis Klimas, who represents Alexander Usyk. Igis said Turkey's not paying for that fight. So Wilder versus Chisora talks would have progressed before Wilder versus Usyk talks, because Wilder versus Chisora likely has a financier. Wilder versus Usyk doesn't. Not completely sure, it's not confirmed, but because the fight is said to be happening in London in April at the same time that Daniel Dubois versus Zile Zhang is supposed to be going down, that gives me the impression this could be a Queensberry Promotions show, broadcasted on DAZN and likely as a pay-per-view. Another way the platform attempts to deliver you value for money for what is their ultimate tier. Maybe you have Daniel Dubois versus Zile Zhang in the co-main and Wilder versus Chisora in the main, with the selling point of this being Derek Chisora's final fight.
And it may be a fight that he wins, because Derek Chisora is going to go in there and fight the same fight that Joseph Parker fought when he beat Wilder, except that kind of fight comes to Derek naturally. It's not an adjustment that he needs to make.
So he fights on the regular. Even if he has lost a step over the years, so has Deontay Wilder.
Both of them.
Overall, Derek Chisora, at least in recent memory, has looked more impressive and more vital than Deontay has.
This is a fight that Derek Chisora can win, the same way that Joseph Parker beat Wilder, barreling forward, throwing looping punches over the top, applying pressure, forcing Wilder onto his back foot because he ain't the least bit graceful.
He never has been.
Speed and reflexes ain't what they used to be, to where timing the opponent's entry so you can counter with a big right hand.
Easier said than done. This is a winnable fight for Derek Chisora in what is his 50th and final fight. His swan song, in many ways, a fairy tale ending.
Because you got some people out there think Wilder can still beat somebody like Usyk, and you've got other people out there that think he's the #1 hardest puncher in heavyweight history. So that would be quite the feather in Derek Chisora's cap.
Elsewhere in the world of boxing, Dana White recently responded to Mauricio Suleiman's claims of aggressive and bullish behavior, that Dana White is being a bully. Dana White responded by saying, "I'm not saying I'm taking over anything. The Ali Act will be intact. Not one word will be changed. Fighters can still fight under that. The WBC, WBA, and IBF will still exist, and fighters can fight for those titles. I'm just doing something different. Who am I bullying? I have barely even done any interviews about it. Oscar, Eddie, Frank, Top Rank will all still be doing their own thing. But will they?
The PBC have been slugging along for 2 years now, and you can see they haven't recovered after losing Fox as a broadcast partner and subsequently Showtime. Top Rank lost ESPN last year, and we don't know what the state of them is.
Oscar may end up losing DAZN, this one, to where them doing their own thing is not a foregone conclusion. The only ones who have any amnesty, any grace, are Frank and Eddie.
Zuffa Boxing will primarily operate in the United States, whereas Frank and Eddie are a bit more international. Most of what Frank does is over there in the UK, and Eddie does shows over there too, among other places. But as far as the United States and what happens here,
I saw Mauricio Suleiman earlier this week refer to Zuffa Boxing as the minor leagues, which would make Top Rank and Golden Boy and PBC the majors. Well, how come the majors ain't got no major broadcast money?
but the minor league guys do.
It's worth noting that as soon as Dana White's UFC became a network free agent and was in the market for a new broadcast partner, it didn't take him very long to find one. But look at these other guys.
It didn't take Dana White long to find his Zuffa Boxing a broadcast partner. But what's been taking PBC so long? What's taking Top Rank so long?
You say that Zuffa Boxing is the minors, but near as I can tell, a major broadcaster trusts that his content will deliver them something more than they trust any of you, because they could have just as easily offered you guys a deal, and they didn't.
Paramount is a big network.
Now, maybe Mauricio feels like Dana is being a bully because he's shaking in his boots, because he's scared of what his entry into the boxing space might mean for the future and how that might alter the axis of power. You've had the right relationships with the right people for a long time, but those relationships without network money may have outlived their usefulness, and you'll have to kiss up to him now.
You heard him say he doesn't really want to work with you.
He wanted to carve out his own lane, do his own thing, come up with his own Zuffa title, Zuffa belt for his Zuffa fighters to fight for.
Maybe Mauricio didn't like the sound of that.
But I've been telling you guys for the last 2 days that Dana and Zuffa may have altered their perspective, their strategy. Initially, they may have anticipated a lot of pushback from the existing game in town, up until they realized
PBC, Top Rank, they're all fucked up. Golden Boy, they're about to be.
they ain't no competition for us. We've got network money. They don't. After a while, what fighters they had may come to
The
us.
sanctioning bodies?
We thought, based on their relationships with them, that we were going to have to work around them. The way it looks,
We don't need a bubble because the sanctioning bodies, after a while, are gonna need us.
maybe that's why Mauricio Suleiman feels like he's being bullied. That's why he feels like Dana's being aggressive. In all actuality, he isn't. Though you feel the walls closing in and the axis of power shifting away from your buddies and over to him.
Boxing could be very different by the end of the year.